Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
And in just 24 hours, the number of illegal immigrants gathered under the Del Rio International Bridge has increased by 4,000. The city's Democratic mayor is calling the situation unprecedented and is declaring a local state of emergency. NTD's Grace Coulter has the details.
They're transiting themselves from the river.
The mayor of Del Rio, Texas, has issued an emergency local disaster declaration and shut down the Del Rio International Bridge. That's due to the overwhelming number of illegal immigrants flocking beneath it. The migrants are mostly Haitian. They are waiting to turn themselves in to Border Patrol to be processed. Mayor Bruno Lozano, a Democrat, said Friday afternoon that over 12,000 migrants are gathered here. On Monday, that number was around 2,000. It grew by over 10,000 in just 5 days. Todd Bensman with the Center for Immigration Studies is on the ground in Del Rio. His footage provides a closer look of what's taking place. Bensman reports that a makeshift village is forming, with migrants building huts and some putting up tents. He says they're crossing over to Mexico for food and supplies. Lozano says the overwhelming number of migrants and lack of human resources pose numerous safety and security risks, including a stampede and terror threats, since so many unvetted people are crossing into the U.S. And the Democrat mayor has another concern. The migrants will become impatient while they wait to be processed. As of Wednesday, the wait time was 7 to 15 days. Now he says it's likely much longer. Lozano notes that if the migrants become frustrated, they can easily overwhelm border agents and law enforcement. That's because there's so many of them. The mayor emphasizes that the situation is unprecedented and says he'll do what he can as mayor to keep his city safe. And he's calling on Congress and the Biden administration to take immediate action. According to the mayor, they're still expecting a caravan of around 8,000 more immigrants to arrive in the next several days. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And the Pentagon has admitted it targeted the wrong vehicle in its drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan. They were targeting an ISIS-K threat, but tragically ended up killing innocent Afghan civilians instead.
Having thoroughly reviewed the findings of the investigation and the supporting analysis by interagency partners, I am now convinced that as many as 10 civilians, including up to 7 children, were tragically killed in that strike. Moreover, we now assess that it is unlikely that the vehicle and those who died were associated with ISIS-K or were a direct threat to U.S. forces.
In late August, the Pentagon claimed the strike took out an ISIS-K bomber who was threatening the U.S.'s evacuation. After following a white Toyota Corolla for 8 hours and deeming it a threat, they launched the Hellfire missile and struck it. And now the Pentagon is trying to compensate the victims' families. But they say that may be difficult now that the U.S. doesn't have resources on the ground in the country anymore. A resident who says he lost 10 relatives in the attack has asked the U.S. to meet with his family and apologize. The Biden administration expects a lot of Americans to roll up their sleeves for COVID-19 booster shots next week. But the FDA's advisory board has rejected a widespread rollout. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the FDA's decision.
The White House says they're stocked up and ready to go.
We have plenty of supply of all 3 vaccines for boosters pending, obviously, the FDA and the CDC recommendations.
The administration expects the approval to come next week, but they may have hit a snag on Friday. An FDA panel rejected the widespread Pfizer booster rollout 16-3. One doctor said many feel there is a role for a 3rd dose, but in her view, there needs to be more data.
I think I would support having a 3rd dose available for other high-risk groups that weren't already given a 3rd dose, such as individuals over the age of choose something, 50, 60. There's different studies out there. And then looking more closely at the safety data for those other individuals.
But there was total support for giving booster shots to people 65 and up and people at high risk of developing severe disease. An FDA official jumped in during the meeting and stated the agency isn't bound by the panel's vote. NPR reports that the FDA usually follows its advisory committee's recommendations. So ultimately, it's still possible that Biden's widespread booster rollout will start on schedule next Monday. Critics say that Biden's booster plan was made public to put pressure on the panel's scientists, which the administration has denied. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And the mayor of San Francisco was caught partying in a club maskless despite strict orders to wear masks regardless of vaccination status. A BLM co-founder was also with her. NTD's Eileen Ang has the story.
In a video shot by Maricar Mendoza, an editor with the San Francisco Chronicle, Mayor London Breed can be seen maskless and partying indoors at Black Cat, a jazz club in the Tenderloin district. In one photo, a Black Lives Matter co-founder, Alicia Garza, sits on her right. Indoors and crowded, people commented asking to clarify the rules around mask wearing. One political commentator said her actions were hypocritical.
There's video of her dancing and pumping her arms, very close proximity to everybody else. And this is complete hypocrisy. You know, London Breed is the top person in the city. She's setting a terrible example of both privilege and disregard for science.
In August, she tightened the vaccination mandate by requiring customers to show proof of vaccination in indoor businesses.
Then we all have to do our part. We need to get vaccinated. We need to make sure that we are respectful to the businesses that ask us to put on our mask or to produce your vaccination card.
Breed told the Chronicle that she often tests for COVID-19 and that she has been careful about not transmitting the virus to other people.
When someone wants to let loose, okay, so go outside, do whatever you want. If this was an outdoor concert, no problem. Outdoor venue, at a park, at the beach, or something like that, that's not a problem, and that's not covered by the mandate. But when you are indoors, you're supposed to have the mask on unless you're eating or drinking.
NTD reached out to the mayor's office for a comment, but did not hear back in time. Last year, Nancy Pelosi's visit to the hair salon without a mask sparked controversy and caused the business to close. After Governor Gavin Newsom attended a birthday party at the French Laundry, the recall momentum built up and led to a recall election. But the recall was defeated as Newsom resumed office. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
And America's racial relations appear to be on Beijing's radar. In a cartoon piece, Beijing's overseas Mouthpiece is teaching parents how to educate their kids on race and racism. But a U.S. nonprofit is sounding the alarm about the cartoon's message. NTD's Juliette Song has the details.
A Wisconsin-based nonprofit is raising alarm over a cartoon piece. The animation is made by Beijing's overseas Mouthpiece, CGTN. The cartoon argues, quote, racism is passed down from generation to generation. And it gives parents tips on how to teach their kids about race and racism. Here's a clip.
Because some people aren't fair, black people have gotten fewer opportunities than other people. So they have less money to buy food and take care of their needs.
Towards the end of the video, it says,
remember, being not racist just keeps things the way they are now. By being anti-racist, you can help lead our children to a brighter future.
The director of the nonprofit Myth-Informed MKE says he's concerned about this cartoon piece because it echoes the ideas of the controversial critical race theory.
Specifically in the video, they talk about you have to build an anti-racist future. But if you don't do anything, you're just promoting the status quo. And the status quo is racist. So if you don't do anything, you're being racist. And that's straight out of critical race theory.
Critical race theory isn't new, but it has sparked a national debate recently. And what's it about? Put it simply, the theory claims that the U.S. is fundamentally a racist nation. It says white people are racist and that they enjoy better positions in society because they're white. And because of this deeply ingrained widespread racism in the society, all the cards are stacked against people of color. The theory has received strong backlash. Over half of the U.S. states have either banned or limited teaching critical race theory in K-12 public schools. With the theory sparking intense controversy on domestic soil, Edward says it's disconcerting to see Beijing's Mouthpiece promoting it. CGTN is the overseas arm of Beijing's state-controlled broadcaster.
I don't believe that they care about racism, but what critical race theory can do is divide the country. And it would seem like if there's a big worry in the United States that critical race theory can undermine our national unity. But that seems something like China, the Chinese Communist Party would love.
And even though the cartoon has only over 10,000 views,
what I'd be concerned about is this, to me, is a trial balloon.
Edward says he's concerned that CGTN could push similar content on TikTok, a popular social media app among American teenagers. TikTok is owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance. Edward also argues this cartoon doesn't fix racism.
If you're concerned about ending racism, because if you're a person that aligns themselves with like caring and fairness and is really disgusted by racism, that this is actually going to make it worse. That these cartoons, they don't cure racism, if that's the goal.
He says instead of a colorblind standard, what cures racism is to treat people equally regardless of their skin color and give them equal opportunity. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Chinese real estate group Evergrande's bubble is bursting and financial crisis looms. But the group's top managers don't seem worried. Insiders reportedly revealed the board of directors and some managers have already cashed out in advance.
Evergrande Group is quickly becoming China's biggest financial worry. The real estate company's liability has reached over $3 billion, up to 2% of China's GDP. 100 of its construction projects across the country are currently suspended. One of the biggest American credit rating agencies, Fitch, downgraded Evergrande's credit to CC. The rating is so low, it's often dubbed junk bond, meaning its ability to fulfill obligations is extremely weak. For days, Evergrande investors have been gathering in front of company sites across China, shouting, "Give me my money back." Authorities deploy the police force to, as they called it, maintain stability. A video shows the front of an Evergrande building in southwestern city of Chongqing, where police officers dragged a protester into their car. In central China, the city of Xi'an, police rushed into the company building and stood in formation to separate the protesters. In the southwest city of Mianyang, police beat people, knocking a girl to the ground. And there are similar scenes around the country. While investors suffer great losses, the group's top tier seems to be acting fast to keep themselves safe. According to Chinese media, an insider claims the company's board director and top managers have cashed out in advance. But we couldn't independently verify this. For example, documents provided by an employee appear to show the group director's wife taking $4 billion in assets. It's not yet clear how Beijing will respond. The chief editor of the Chinese Communist Party's Mouthpiece, the Global Times, talked about the situation on his personal social media account, saying the company shouldn't have the fluke mindset of too big to fail. He added if Evergrande should go bankrupt, their bankruptcy wouldn't trigger a financial storm.
Constitution Day, commemorating the signing and adoption of the U.S. Constitution in 1787. And 234 years later, many are saying it's unconstitutional to mandate vaccines and deny religious exemptions. NTD's Jason Perry spoke with a constitutional researcher to find out more.
Tim Barton is the president of Wall Builders, an organization that focuses on America's history and constitutional foundation. The group takes its name from the biblical concept of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and calls for greater citizen involvement in rebuilding America. Barton explains that the Founding Fathers recognized that people were not perfect, so they created a system of checks and balances in our government, knowing that unchecked power could lead to tyranny and abuse.
The president is the one charged with upholding and fulfilling law, but he's not the one that gets to make law. And so when you have an executive order that is making law, telling people to do something, that's actually unconstitutional. And on top of it being unconstitutional because he can't make law, it's also unconstitutional because it violates people's freedom of choice, freedom of religion, which is protected in the Constitution.
And on Constitution Day, people are encouraged to read and study the Constitution, which, as Barton says, is the basis for the law of the land in America. He also mentions that the Constitution protects the rights of the individual, specifically freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and freedom of choice.
For a lot of Americans right now, they have a conviction, and many people with a very strong religious conviction, that they believe they shouldn't be forced to get a vaccine because they might believe that's not something God would want them to do. Well, if you believe there's something God wants you to do or doesn't want you to do, our U.S. Constitution had exceptions for that you could follow your conscience in a religious sense, and you could not be compelled to violate your conscience by the federal government.
He says everyone has the freedom of religion, as long as that religion doesn't violate a person's life, property, or freedoms.
Unfortunately, because very few Americans actually understand the Constitution, know what it says, or even appreciate the significance of upholding the constitutional law, we really haven't done a good job of putting enough pressure on this administration to do things that are constitutional. And so we are seeing continued moves of unconstitutional behavior, even President Biden admitting he knows some of these things are unconstitutional, and yet he is doing them anyway.
Barton says when you understand not only the three branches of government, but also what their roles and functions are, you can then hold those leaders accountable when they begin doing things that are unconstitutional. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And the UK announced easing restrictions for international travelers to England. Starting October 4th, fully vaccinated travelers from low-risk countries will no longer have to take an expensive COVID-19 test. The country is also scrapping its traffic light system. That means destinations will simply be ranked low or high risk instead of red, amber, and green. And the UK's Transport Minister, Grant Shapps, says 8 countries will be added to the safe list. Travelers returning to England from Turkey, Pakistan, the Maldives, and some other countries will not have to quarantine. That's because those countries are removed from the so-called COVID red list for travel. The new proposals aim to help boost the travel industry. How do you conceive an outstanding, out-of-this-world painting? You could ask Sandro Botticelli. A museum in Paris is showcasing the works of the Italian Renaissance painter, inviting viewers to experience beauty, grace, and harmony. NTD's correspondent David Vives has more.
With an impressive art collection dating back to the Middle Ages, the Jacquemart-André Museum takes the spectator back in time. An appropriate place to celebrate 15th century Italian painter Sandro Botticelli and the beauty of his works. It took 5 years for curator Anna De Benedetti to prepare the exhibition and collect masterpieces from prestigious European museums. Botticelli played a major role in the early Renaissance.
I would invent new scenes like the mythological scenes that maybe is best known for nowadays. Feminine nudes, extraordinary religious scenes. So that was really the genius of Botticelli, how he come by to understand his time so well.
Botticelli is known for famous paintings such as The Springs or The Birth of Venus. He also introduced new techniques and ideas to other artists of his time, such as the use of perspective, the golden ratio, and how to represent nature in mythological scenes. How to represent female nudity, which stands for beauty, grace, and reflects the harmony of the world. Another more specific example is the use of gold leaf on parts of a painting to give the holy figures an otherworldly look. In the words of De Benedetti, he helped to bring out new ideas relating to the divine realm, how humans can perceive it, and what they should do with it.
So these type of works of art were not meant to be put into a museum, they were not meant to be decorative. They have a very specific function within the home. So it was used to be a support for a spiritual exercise. The spectator was invited to look at the model, the role model of the Virgin, of her divine role. Most of all, it's the relationship between the mother and child that is absolutely incredible and stunning. She became almost a human figure. So for the spectator, she becomes a real model, and the spectator can really focus on her and feel her so close. And at the same time, she's very distant because she's the Mother of God. What you could describe Botticelli's touch, this way of conveying absolute grace and harmony within his figures.
Renaissance painters are known to have brought new definition of the relationship between humanity and divinity. Under the support of wealthy patrons, the quality of fine arts reached a new level. This was also made possible with the sincere wish of the artists to better their craft. De Benedetti says Renaissance artists used to copy one another out of inspiration.
You would exchange ideas, you would communicate. Most of the work were, by the way, exposed in public spaces, and there was no idea of plagiarism or imitation. There was just inspiration, and that's also the great beauty of the Renaissance in Florence.
The exhibition will last until the 24th of January. David Vives, NTD News.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to catch all of our programs on TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.